So I'm dealing with a portfolio acquisition right now. I'm helping this buyer obtain 8 properties in a single package. In any portfolio or rental property that has current tenants, we've got tenants' rights, and we write that into the contract that there are tenants' rights to the current lease. We also write in a contingency that the buyer is going to view the lease and approve the lease before closing on the transaction. Now, in the perfect world, you would probably want to see that lease up front, but most of the time you're going to see it through the escrow process. But in this case, we've got 8 individual leases that the buyer needs to review before he's able to close. He based his initial numbers on the rent roll sent over by the seller. The rent roll shows you each unit and how much rent it brings in. Whenever we get the leases to these 8 properties, the rent amounts per the lease did not match what was on the rent roll. This is a huge problem, and so we've been talking with the listing agent back and forth to try to figure out where the discrepancy is. Well, it turns out a lot of these tenants have been living in these units for 10, 20 years. They had old leases, like leases from early 2000s, and those were the rent amounts that we were seeing on these leases. Now, it's very common for a lease to extend to month after the initial lease term. But if you've got any sort of changes in that lease, i.e. the lease amount, you want to get that in writing somewhere. We had to go back to the listing agent and say, hey, these leases don't match the rent roll. Where is your proof that the rent has increased? And here's why that's important. Say the tenant has been paying the higher lease to the previous landlord for the past however many months. But once my buyer takes over, he's got to have something in writing to take to that tenant and say, hey, look, with your previous landlord, you were paying this, and now you're paying this, especially if it's month to month. We needed something in writing, some sort of proof that shows what the tenant was actually paying. If you've got investment properties or you've got a portfolio that you're thinking about selling in the near future, make sure you've got your paperwork in order. Whenever we list an investment property, we want to know all the expenses for the last 12 months. We want to know the rent roll for the last 12 months. We want to know how many late pays were there, and we want to see your lease and any current documents you have with that tenant. This is important not only for sellability, but for liability too, so that you know whenever you sold that property, it's done and over with, and the new buyer isn't going to come to you with any questions that weren't answered through the escrow process. As a buyer, it's important because you need to have all your eggs in the basket whenever you're taking over a currently rented property. Just something I ran into this week. That's all I've got today. Bye.